Hey guys, tonight we step barefoot onto the cool, damp soil of a moonlit Maori village in ancient Aotearoa, modern-day New Zealand. A smoky haze curls from low-burning fires, dancing between carved wooden buildings that creak ever so slightly in the ocean breeze. Somewhere behind you, a hollow drum thumps once, then falls silent. You pause. Because tonight, this village isn't just quiet, it's watching you. A hush falls over the Maori, the sacred communal courtyard. All eyes are on you. And you're not just here for dinner. Nope. You're here for judgment. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is where you are. I always love hearing that. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step onto the smooth, shell-strewn platform at the heart of the Maori, your chest tight with anticipation. It's evening, but the warmth of the day still clings to the woven flax mats underfoot. Around you, elders in feathered cloaks sit silently in a wide semicircle. Their tattoos swirl down their faces like rivers of ink, each line a record of battles, marriages, and decisions made under moonlight like this. The Maori is not just a meeting place, it's where the spiritual and physical worlds blur. Beneath your feet, your ancestors sleep in the soil. Above, stars blink coldly. Beside you, a long wooden staff topped with a carved tiki. Not exactly a welcome mat. In this world, justice isn't delivered by paperwork or courtrooms, it's delivered by protocol. Every step you take is measured. Every glance must be respectful. Even your shadow, yes, your literal shadow, must not cross into sacred space without permission. The community doesn't just observe the rules, they live them. The Maori call it tapu, or sacred restriction. Step outside it, and you risk being punished not by anger, but by sacred balance being restored. And that, my friend, can get very weird, very quickly. You remember accidentally stepping over a basket of food that was meant for the chief. Innocent mistake, right? Well, now you're standing here. Your fate in the hands of a council who probably knew your grandfather's grandfather. It's not all bad, of course. Sometimes, the punishment is just a light public scolding or having to offer a gift of greenstone, shell, or cooked eel. But other times, especially if mana, spiritual prestige, has been disrupted, things can take a turn. Tonight feels serious. You look to your left. The Camacho, an elderly speaker, rises slowly. His face is so wrinkled it looks like folded bark. His voice is barely above a whisper, but it slices through the night. You have crossed the line of tapu, he says, and now we must hear what the ancestors say. Wait, the ancestors? A hush settles again. In the far corner, a young boy stirs a smoky fire in a hollowed-out stone bowl. The smoke thickens and spirals upward. The elder leans toward it, whispering something you can't quite hear. You feel a shiver that's not from the wind. This is the part where things get slightly paranormal. See, in some villages, punishments weren't only about action, they were about energy. If a person's action had thrown off the village's balance, then the Wairu, or spirit world, had to be involved in righting the wrong. Some punishments were determined not by a vote, but by how the smoke curled, how the wind shifted, or if a bird flew in the wrong direction. Historians still argue whether these rituals were symbolic gestures or deeply believed supernatural communication. Either way, you're starting to wish you'd just gone around the basket. You shift uncomfortably. The smoke now smells sweet, like burning moss and dried fern. A second elder begins to chant. His voice is rhythmic and low, carrying a strange, soothing cadence. You don't understand the words, but your bones feel them. This chant isn't just for drama, it's a kind of spiritual summons. In Maori belief, words have power. A chant, or karakia, could open a portal between worlds, asking ancestors for insight or approval. Sometimes, chants are used to welcome. Sometimes, to condemn. The first elder raises a hand. The chanting stops. You must sit alone until dawn, he says. The ancestors need silence to decide. You swallow. Alone, in the center of the Mary? All night? Not exactly a slap on the wrist, but not torture either. Still, there's something eerie about it. The crowd disperses slowly. No one says your name. No one meets your eye. Even your auntie walks away. You sit. An hour passes. Maybe two. The fire sputters now and then, casting flickering shapes on the wood-carved faces around you. Some of them look almost alive. You could swear one of them just blinked. But maybe it's just your imagination. Or maybe that's part of the punishment. Some French historians believe this kind of sit and be judged ritual worked on a psychological level. That the real punishment was social isolation, being removed from your tight-knit community just long enough to feel the sting of it. Others think the ritual had spiritual weight, maybe even real fear of ghostly retaliation if it wasn't followed. The stars shift. Somewhere in the distance, an owl cries. You count your breaths. Maybe this is how change happens, not with yelling, or violence, or shame, but with silence, stillness, and a little fear. The night is long, but you sit through it. Eyes open, heart beating a little slower now. And in the morning, you'll stand. You'll greet the sun. Maybe someone will bring you water. Maybe not. But you'll step off the Mary knowing this, you've been seen. And for now, forgiven. Just don't touch the chief's basket again. You don't sleep well after a night like that. The next morning, your joints ache from sitting on woven mats, and the soles of your feet are sore. But nobody says anything. That's part of the deal. You walk away, and the village lets you. Sort of. Because while the punishment is over, the memory of your mistake will hang in the air like with smoke. And what you feel most deeply isn't pain or even fear, it's the low, steady thrum of shame. Not the Western version, where people just gossip and move on. This is communal shame. Spiritual shame. You didn't just break a rule. You disrupted a sacred order. And here in this world, breaking that order meant you broke the invisible threads that tie everyone together. That's where tapu comes in, a Maori concept that's hard to translate directly but incredibly powerful. Tapu means sacred or restricted, and it can apply to people, places, objects, and even times of day. Touch the wrong thing? That's a violation. Enter the wrong hut? Violation. Step into a sacred stream to wash your laundry? Triple violation. You get the idea. Some things were tapu only temporarily, like a newly dug grave. Others were permanent, like the bones of your ancestors, or the chief's carved staff. And the strange part? The punishment wasn't always delivered by a person. People believed tapu could punish you all by itself. Get sick out of nowhere? You probably touched something forbidden. Your canoe capsizes 3 days in a row? You probably crossed someone's tapu shadow. To keep tapu in check, every village had rules, some written in chants, others passed down by mouth. But even more important than rules were rituals. Let's say you want to cross a stream near a sacred site. You don't just wait in like you're on holiday. You wait. You ask. Maybe you whisper a chant, or throw a fern leaf onto the water to see how it floats. It's not about fear. It's about balance. Historians still debate whether tapu was truly a spiritual belief or simply a sophisticated social system designed to maintain order in close-knit villages. But even skeptics admit, whatever it was, it worked. Because when everyone believes that every object, every action, every second carries weight, you tread lighter. So what happens when you break taboo and don't get the silent treatment or a spiritual trial? Well, sometimes, things get creative. Imagine this. You're caught gossiping about someone who recently lost a family member, a huge breach of sacred protocol. Instead of yelling, the elders tell you to go retrieve a specific feather cloak from the meeting house and wear it during your chores. Simple, right? But the cloak is brightly colored and extremely formal, meant for ceremonies and chieftains. Wearing it in everyday life is absurd. The whole village sees you hanging laundry or fetching firewood in full regalia and instantly understands, you've messed up. It's like being forced to wear a tuxedo to clean toilets. Dignity, gently obliterated. This kind of punishment wasn't just embarrassing. It was symbolic. In the Maori worldview, clothing wasn't just for warmth, it represented status, mana, and spiritual cleanliness. To misuse it, that was a public reset. A subtle way of telling you, you've stepped out of place, and now everyone knows. And it wasn't always the garment itself, it could be how you wore it. Maybe you're made to wear it backwards. Or inside out. Or only on one arm. These weren't punishments that left scars. But they left impressions. And for a culture built on communal harmony, that was often enough. And yet, the strange thing? No one mocked you. Not out loud, anyway. Because everyone understood the point. The punishment wasn't meant to crush you. It was to remind you of your place, your duties, your interwoven role in the village web. Tomorrow, someone else might wear the same cloak. Or face the same silent circle. It could be your cousin. Or your chief's daughter. Tapu doesn't care who you are, it only cares what you do. The rules are invisible, but ever-present. And they hum in the background of every action, every meal, every breath. So, as the day fades and you settle back into your place among the others, the cloaked punishment behind you, something shifts. You've been seen. You've been corrected. And now, like a canoe nudged back into its river path, you flow again with the others. You sit at the communal fire that night with a bowl of kamara in hand. No one brings up the cloak. No one has to. Balance restored. You're up early again, this time trying not to draw attention to yourself. You keep your eyes low, your movements careful. The village is quiet, except for the occasional call of a tue bird and the rhythmic pounding of someone preparing taro. But then, you see her. A woman walking slowly through the village square. She's not carrying food or fetching water. No, she's wearing that cloak, the bright, ceremonial one, but this time it's tied around her waist like a skirt and dragging through the mud. You glance at her face. She's not smiling. She doesn't need to. Everyone already knows. This is another kind of punishment. Not harsh, not loud, but deeply effective. She's wearing shame, quite literally, on her hips. That's the brilliance, and the quiet cruelty, of Maori justice. The punishment fits the person and the breach. This woman? She insulted a guest by not offering food during a welcome ritual. That may sound like a minor thing today, but in this culture, hospitality is sacred. You don't just welcome a visitor, you elevate them. Make them feel like family. Forget to offer food? That's a rupture in the moral fabric. So she walks, dragging the cloak behind her like a threadbare apology. She's allowed to carry on with her day, but not without that colorful reminder trailing in the dirt behind her. Later, as the sun gets higher and shadows sharpen under the thatched eaves, you pass another figure of punishment, a young man, barely older than a boy, wearing a feathered headpiece, backwards. You stifle a chuckle. Not because it's funny, okay, maybe a little, but because it looks so wrong. The feathers are supposed to fan upward like a hawk in flight. Instead, they droop over his face like a wilted fern. Turns out, he insulted a respected elder during a heated debate. The punishment? Walk around all day with an emblem of leadership, pointed the wrong direction. It's poetic justice. He pretended to know better than someone wiser? Now he literally looks backward. These punishments don't just punish. They teach. Every time someone slips up, big or small, the whole village gets a reminder. A refresher course in respect, humility, and proper behavior. And it's oddly elegant. Instead of pain or exile, the wrongdoer becomes a walking lesson. Their dignity takes a temporary hit, but they stay woven into the village's fabric. No one is cast out unless things go really, really wrong. Historians still argue whether these clothing-based punishments were uniformly practiced across tribes or if they varied widely depending on region and local custom. Some even think the cloak-based shame rituals were more common in higher-status families, because regular folks couldn't afford to waste ceremonial garments on misbehavior. Either way, one thing is clear, what you wear says everything. You remember last month when the chief's nephew was caught sneaking food before a ceremony. Did he get beaten? Nope. He was forced to wear a women's flax skirt for 2 days straight. In a culture with strong gendered roles, that's no small thing. He couldn't just hide either. He had to walk past warriors, children, weavers, and fishermen, every one of them nodding silently, acknowledging the skirt but never saying a word. And that was the point. No yelling. No blood. Just deep, ceremonial awkwardness. The real punishment? Knowing that every look was a lesson, and you were the subject. Oddly enough, most of these clothing punishments didn't last more than a day or two. The goal wasn't to ruin someone, it was to realign them. And when the garment came off, it was over. Truly over. No grudges. No smirking whispers a week later. The cloak got brushed off, folded, and placed back where it belonged. And the person? Rethreaded into the village rhythm, like nothing ever happened. It's a system built on grace, really. Just wrapped in feathers and a little mud. You've just finished helping lash a canoe frame when a strange sound stops you. A deep, rhythmic chant. Slow and uneven, like breath echoing through a hollow log. You glance toward the sound, and there it is, an elder holding up a carved gourd, its body polished smooth, its mouth rimmed with red ochre. The talking gourd. You freeze. This punishment is rare. Reserved only for breaches that involve lying, especially when someone tries to deceive the village or dishonor their lineage. You watch the accused sit cross-legged in front of the elder, hands on their knees, head bowed. The gourd is held high, its hollow mouth aimed at the offender's chest as the chant rises again. And just like that, the judgment begins, not from a person, but from an object. You learn later that the person being judged spread false rumors about another family, accusing them of hiding sacred relics during a land-sharing ceremony. The claim wasn't just false. It threatened tribal unity. And here, lies don't just wound people, they tear open the threads of ancestral respect. That's why the talking gourd is so feared. Carved from a calabash, these gourds are often etched with spirals, waves, and figures of tribal ancestors. Some are filled with pebbles, feathers, or bits of bone, anything that gives them weight and mystery. But the real power lies in symbolism. The gourd doesn't literally talk, of course, but the chants that accompany it are filled with metaphor and warning. The elder recites the names of ancestors. Then he says, "You carry their blood, but you carry none of their truth." Ouch! The air goes still. And then, the elder lowers the gourd, and places it in the person's lap. You can almost feel the weight. Not just of the object, but of what it represents. The silence after the chant is deafening. No yelling. No punishment announced. Just the presence of that gourd, like a spirit watching you breathe. Some French scholars believe the practice of the talking gourd may have originated from early Pacific rituals where sacred objects were considered vessels for ancestral voices. Others argue it was more theatrical than spiritual, designed to create an atmosphere of guilt and awe. But even now, standing far off, you're sweating. The person stays like that for nearly an hour. Still. Silent. Holding the carved vessel that just echoed their failure back at them. Eventually, the elder retrieves it. He doesn't say a word. He just walks away. The message is clear. If the ancestors were disappointed, they've already said so. You don't need to be beaten when your bloodline itself is ashamed. Later, you pass the meeting house and spot the gourd hanging inside, tied to a carved beam, facing outward, its rim catching the last orange light of the day. And just for a moment, it really does look like it's watching. You wonder what it would say if it could speak. Probably, tell the truth. Or I'll be back. Of all the punishments in the village, this one might be the quietest and the loudest. It's one thing to wear shame. It's another to feel it, humming in your hands. The next time you witness a punishment, it doesn't involve feathers, chants, or carved gourds. It involves food. Which, frankly, makes it all the more unsettling. It starts in the evening. The fire pits are glowing, and the women have just finished unwrapping bundles of fish and taro from steaming baskets. You're expecting a communal meal like any other, but then you notice the arrangement. One person, just one, is sitting apart from the rest. Their mat is decorated with extra care. The best cuts of fish are placed before them. There's even a carved drinking cup, polished to a shine. But their face? Absolutely miserable. That's when you realize, this isn't a feast. It's a punishment. In Maori society, communal eating is deeply symbolic. It represents unity, reciprocity, and equality. To eat with others is to be woven into their well-being. So imagine being served the best meal of your life, alone. The offender this time? A man who ordered food during a village-wide shortage, sneaking dried eel and kamara into his family's hut while others went hungry. When discovered, he wasn't shouted at. No spears were thrown. Instead, he was ordered to sit and eat. And no one would sit beside him. No one would speak. They all just watched. The punishment is brilliant in its design. The very thing he craved, private indulgence, is turned into a slow, shaming spectacle. Each bite reminds him of what he did. Each sip, a toast to his selfishness. You glance at him as he eats. His hands tremble. He tries to chew slowly, but the silence around him makes every swallow sound impossibly loud. Some younger kids giggle and are hushed immediately. This isn't meant to humiliate in a cruel way. It's meant to reflect. You're meant to feel what you made others feel. That's the pattern with Maori justice. Whatever wound you've caused, you're made to feel its shape. And nothing tastes good when your soul is hollow. Historians still debate whether these meals of disgrace were ritualized across different iwi tribes, or whether they evolved in specific coastal communities where food scarcity taught hard lessons. Others suggest they served an economic purpose. By redistributing excess to the guilty party, it subtly reminded others to keep wealth and resources circulating. But even if the logic was practical, the emotional impact was anything but. You could see it in the way that man sat, shoulders hunched, eyes on his food but never really tasting it. Later that night, as the fires die down and people begin slipping into sleep, the man gets up, walks to the main cooking pit, and scrubs the stones clean with his own hands. No one tells him to. No one even acknowledges it. But you know what it means. He understands now. Not all punishments need fire or feathers. Sometimes, all it takes is a full belly and an empty heart. You're watching the children play a clapping game when the mood in the village suddenly shifts. A hush falls. Not the dramatic kind, just a subtle stillness. Birds stop calling. A dog freezes in mid-step. You follow everyone's gaze, and then you see it. A man, middle-aged and muscular, is standing at the edge of the chief's dwelling. Not inside. Not touching. Just standing. But his shadow, it stretches forward. Long, sharp, and unmistakable. It has touched the threshold of the chief's hut. At first, you're confused. No one shouted. No crime was committed. But then it clicks. The man's shadow crossed into sacred space without permission. To you, it seems absurd. It's just a shadow. But in this world, it's so much more. In Maori belief, the body's shadow can carry spiritual weight. Where it lands, so too lands a part of your essence. Letting it cross into sacred areas, especially the home of someone high in mana, can be seen as an uninvited spiritual intrusion. And when you intrude without consent, consequences follow. The chief steps forward, expression unreadable. He raises a hand. And without a word, the man drops to his knees. The crowd slowly circles, forming a wide ring around him. No one speaks. The man doesn't protest. You realize this is a ritual punishment known by some elders as the Forbidden Shadow. He has to remain kneeling until the sun fully passes overhead, so his shadow shortens, recedes, and no longer touches anything sacred. It's poetic. Almost beautiful. But also kind of terrifying. You glance at the sky. It's barely mid-morning. That shadow's going to linger for a while. He doesn't get water. He doesn't get rest. Just silence. Stillness. Time to think about where his presence has reached, and where it shouldn't have. Some fringe researchers claim this ritual may have begun as a practical way to teach respect for physical boundaries. Others argue it originated in a much deeper fear, that shadows, like footprints, leave invisible marks on sacred places, marks that need to be purified. Either way, the result is the same. Everyone now knows, shadows matter. Hours pass. The man remains still. Even the kids, normally buzzing with curiosity, avoid playing too close. His shadow is still seen as hot. Too charged to mess with. And when noon comes, and the shadow shrinks back into his body like a breath being inhaled, the chief gives a small nod. That's it. The punishment is over. The man rises, dusts off his knees, and quietly returns to his work as if nothing happened. And maybe that's the strangest part, the silence after shame. You think about your own shadow for the rest of the day. Where it falls. Who it touches. And that night, when the moon casts long silver silhouettes across the sleeping village, you step carefully. Just in case. Because now you know, even your shadow has rules. You're ankle deep in cold, sticky mud again, but this time, it's not by accident. You're not chasing runaway chickens or slipping on a rainy hillside. No, this time, it's a punishment. And not the painful kind either. This one's worse. This one's embarrassing. You're standing still as two elders smear your face with a thick paste of wet earth mixed with crushed charcoal and something that smells suspiciously like rotten shellfish. Their movements are slow and deliberate, almost ceremonial, but the onlookers are stifling laughter. Even the children, peeking through the bushes, are giggling behind their hands. Your crime? You stole a few taro roots from a neighbor's patch. Nothing grand, nothing violent. But theft, even petty theft, is still a betrayal in this tight-knit Maori village. And when the crime doesn't warrant blood or bone, it warrants shame. This is Wakama in action. Shame is a social weapon. And tonight, you're the lesson. The mud isn't just slapped on randomly. There's form and flair here. Swirls curl up your cheekbones. Thick ridges run across your forehead like the moko tattoos of a warrior, but instead of pride, they mark you with farce. One side of your face is painted in a sad, droopy pattern. The other looks permanently startled. It's like a clown costume, designed not for joy but for communal justice. And you've got to wear this all night. In some Maori hapu, subtribes, punishments like this were crafted not just to humiliate, but to teach. These weren't throwaway gestures. The mud mask was temporary, but the lesson? Long-lasting. Villagers would whisper your nickname for weeks. Some unlucky souls got stuck with their mockery names for life: Crooked Nose, Swollen Pig, Mudface Mo. You could grow old, respected, married with grandchildren, and still be called Puddle Boy behind your back. The worst part? You couldn't even wipe the mud off. That was part of the punishment. You had to let it flake off naturally, or wait for the elders' approval the next day. Otherwise, you'd get an extra round of face paint and an upgraded nickname. And what if you tried to hide indoors? Oh no, my friend. That's when they'd start the mockery march. A group of young villagers, sometimes even the very elders themselves, would come to your hut, sing silly songs about your crime, and invite you out to dance for redemption. Think of it like a medieval roast mixed with a public shaming conga line. You'd have to walk the village perimeter with everyone, all while wearing the mud mask, nodding solemnly to each hut you passed. Sometimes the village dogs would even join in, barking in rhythm. Seriously, imagine your legacy being the one who was followed by a barking parade. Now, historians are still debating whether this type of punishment was universal across Maori tribes or more localized. Some accounts suggest these rituals were exclusive to coastal iwi tribes, where resource disputes were frequent, while others claim the muddy shaming was reserved for more ceremonial settlements where mana, honor, was fiercely protected. Either way, the result was the same. You were not just punished, you were transformed into a story. A living cautionary tale. One elder might point to you years later and say to a child, "See him? He once stole eel from the chief's basket and had to wear a snail-shaped mask for 3 days. You don't want to be that guy." But the real genius of the mud punishment lies in its temporary nature. No blood spilled. No bones broken. No exile. Just communal memory, and a whole lot of laughter. Its punishment is performance art. Justice with a comedic twist. You shuffle back to your hut eventually, cheeks stiff with drying dirt, heart aching from the laughter of your friends. And yet, there's a strange comfort in knowing tomorrow you'll be forgiven. Mud washes away. Stories fade. And the next time someone messes up, it'll be their turn to wear the face. Still, you might avoid the taro patch for a while. You sit cross-legged by the fire, the orange glow dancing on your face as the embers crackle like whispering ancestors. Tonight, you're learning a lesson, but not through lecture or scolding. No, you're learning with your arms bound. Not harshly. Not cruelly. But deliberately. Intricately. Your wrists are cinched in a pattern of flax rope, a harakique we've so beautifully knotted, it almost looks ceremonial. Almost. Except this is no adornment. It's a punishment, handed down after you were caught spreading gossip, again. In the old Maori villages, social harmony wasn't just an ideal, it was survival. One slanderous whisper could disrupt the delicate web of kinship and obligation that kept the community functioning. So, if your tongue wagged too freely, your hands got tied, literally. The punishment was simple, you'd be restrained in public view. The knots weren't there to hurt, but to humble. They were lessons, etched not in bruises but in embarrassment and stillness. You couldn't gesture, couldn't eat on your own, couldn't participate in the daily rhythm of communal life. And because Maori society was so deeply communal, this stillness wasn't just a restriction, it was a kind of exile. You watch others prepare kai, or join haka practice, while you sat stiff like a carved po. Children might giggle. Elders might frown. And you'd feel it, that subtle sting of social disapproval. But here's the thing, untying didn't just come with time. You had to earn it. Maybe it was by speaking an apology aloud in front of the iwi, or offering a food gift, kaihakai, to the person you slighted. Or sometimes, just showing patience. Historians still argue whether this practice was common to all iwi or only practiced by specific hapu, but oral traditions suggest the symbolism of rope was widespread. It wasn't about the punishment, it was about weaving you back into the fabric you frayed. And the weaving mattered. Rope making itself was a sacred skill. Harakeke wasn't just pulled from the earth, it was harvested with prayers, sliced at precise angles, and softened with hours of scraping. A badly tied rope? That would have been an insult to the plant and the ancestors. So in this punishment, you were literally being bound by the cultural values you ignored. And every twist, every knot, became a meditation on restraint, not just physical, but spiritual. Of course, this wasn't always taken seriously by everyone. You might have heard of one notorious trickster who, while bound, learned to itch his nose using only his toes. The story goes that an amused tohunga let him go early, for creativity. But others weren't so lucky. For some, hours became days. And in colder weather, that could mean real discomfort, numb fingers, sore joints, and a deep hunger you couldn't feed alone. Yet, you'd be surprised how powerful the soft punishment could be. There's something humbling about needing others. And something healing about being helped. Often, those who were bound returned not just quieter, but kinder. Because in a world of tight social knots, you learn quickly that untying one thread could unravel the whole. The next time you see a Maori carving with spiraling patterns on its arms, take a closer look. Some believe those symbolize not tattoos, but ropes, the quiet reminders of a time when punishment wasn't about pain, but pause. A pause long enough to reflect. To reconnect. To come back better. You wake to silence. Not the comforting hush of birds rustling in the trees or the distant hush of ocean wind on the cliffs, but a hollow, thick kind of quiet. A quiet that hums in your chest and makes your skin tighten. You sit up slowly in your flax-woven mat and look around the your sleeping hut, but it's already empty. Everyone has risen. Everyone is gone. And no one has come to wake you. You step out into the morning mist of the village. The sky is heavy with low gray clouds, and the air smells of wet earth and burnt wood. Your feet crunch softly on the dew-covered ground as you move toward the central path, hoping to find the others, hoping to ask why your aunt didn't speak to you last night, why the elders haven't called your name. But as you pass the cooking area, the gardens, and the central fire pit, the people are there, just not for you. They do not look at you. They do not gesture. And they most certainly do not speak your name. This is the silent circle, and you, those still inside the village, are no longer among the living in their eyes. You've broken a tapu, an ancient law, perhaps unknowingly, perhaps carelessly, and the consequence is not pain, not banishment, but social disappearance. You still walk. You still breathe. But your presence has been erased. No one will speak to you until the tohunga, the spiritual leader, says you are worthy again. And until then, the silence is your punishment. You remember the story your grandmother used to tell. Of a woman who stepped over the shadow of a chief while laughing. It was playful, unintentional. But when she realized, it was too late. The next day, no one greeted her. No one offered food. She became a ghost with a heartbeat. Days passed. Weeks. She began to hum to herself, loudly, in hopes someone would break first. But the village held firm. Her voice, she said, became too loud in her own ears. Eventually, her silence returned with humility. She sat before the tohunga with her head bowed and palms open, and only then was her name spoken once more. For the Maori of old, the silent circle was a punishment more chilling than a strike of a weapon, because it cut you off from your story. Your name, your mana, your social spirit, it lived in other people's mouths. And without them saying it, you began to doubt you existed at all. Sometimes, this ritual was reserved for those who spoke falsehoods in sacred spaces, or those who interrupted the mourning process after a death. Other times, it was for those who violated taboo boundaries during ceremonies. It wasn't meant to destroy you, but to remind you, you only exist because others see you. Days in the circle were quiet, but the silence was loud. You couldn't eat with others. You couldn't join communal tasks. Children were instructed not to look at you. You became a lesson in motion, a walking shadow that younger villagers would whisper about later, in safe corners. But there was also a path to return. Each night, you were still allowed to listen. You could sit at the edge of the firelight and hear stories being told, stories about ancestors, about clever birds, about gods who punished and forgave. And in those stories, you might hear a parallel to your own mistake. This was intentional. The elders believed that true repentance was born not from pain, but from understanding. You had to see the shape of your error in another's journey. Eventually, the tohunga would speak, not to you, but about you. He might say, "There is a shadow at the edge of the fire that wishes to be whole again." Then you would pause. If the village agreed, the next day you would find a small leaf of kawakawa laid gently on your sleeping mat, a sign of healing. That evening, the tohunga would place a hand on your shoulder, look you in the eyes, and say your name. And just like that, your voice would return to the world. In modern eyes, this may seem cruel. But to the Maori, whose world was woven together by interconnection and spiritual harmony, such a punishment was deeply rooted in restoration. To erase one's voice was to remind them of its power. And to return it was to welcome them back, not as a stranger, but as someone transformed. So tonight, as you lie in your mat and let sleep draw near, imagine that silence, not as something empty, but as a sacred waiting. A chance to be missed. A path to be restored. And when someone finally speaks your name again, it will never sound the same. The air is thick tonight. The fire crackles, but offers no warmth. Your limbs are heavy, and your chest feels hollow. Something isn't right. The tohunga, the village shaman, stands beside you. His eyes narrow as he circles, whispering words not meant for common ears. He lifts a carved wooden pendant, waves it before your chest, and suddenly stops. His face darkens. He leans in, and in a voice like gravel rolling downstream, says, "Your soul is gone." Your stomach drops. Not stolen. Not cursed. But fled. And worst of all, it left because of you. This was known as Te Wairoa, the abandoned spirit. A rare punishment, but feared more than physical pain or exile. You had broken tapu, a sacred law. Maybe you entered the burial cave without a tohunga's blessing. Maybe you mocked a ritual, or refused a family obligation. Perhaps you insulted your ancestors' mana by refusing to take part in a tribal story. In Maori belief, such acts could cause the Wairoa, your soul, to slip out of alignment. But unlike other punishments, you weren't blamed like a criminal. You were pitted, like someone who had let go of their tether to life. Still, you were held responsible. The tohunga prescribes the only path back, a soul recovery journey. But this isn't something you can buy, or beg for. You must prove yourself worthy of your own return. The ritual begins at dawn. You are given a cloak of flax and ash. A food bundle with no meat, no salt. Silence is required. No songs, no stories, no greetings. Only walking. You are sent alone into the wilderness, toward places where the soul might linger. A river pool where you used to play as a child. The cliff where your father first taught you the haka. The roots of the old Pohutukua tree where your grandfather told his last story. You must visit each place and speak not to the world, but to yourself. You must confess. Out loud. Under open sky. What you broke. What you ran from. What you ignored. What you regret. Sometimes it rains. Sometimes the wind howls. Sometimes nothing answers. But if you are lucky, if the tohunga is right, there will come a moment where you feel warmth again. A rush behind your eyes. A flutter in your chest. A memory that blooms like moss after rain. They say that is your Wairua returning. But the journey isn't complete. You must return to the village without speaking. Only when you stand again before the tohunga, only when he peers into your eyes and sees your light rekindled, will the punishment be lifted. Then, and only then, does he place his hand on your shoulder and declare, your soul walks with you again. The others gather. Faces soften. A kia places a garland around your neck. A child hands you a bowl of kai. A waiata rises, low and slow, from the women. You are not just forgiven. You are whole again. You stand at the foot of a cliff, its sharp face catching the wind like a blade. The sun is low. The light slants sideways, painting the rocks in fire and shadow. This is not just any cliff. This is Te Pari Kohamuimu, the Whistling Cliff. No one climbs it for fun. No one climbs it twice. Only those who must atone. This is your sentence. Not to break rock. Not to carry logs. But to climb in silence, and let the cliff itself judge your spirit. The village says the wind here can hear what the elders cannot. Your only task, reach the top without complaint. Not a grunt. Not a cry. Not a curse under breath. Every noise, every breath, becomes part of your offering. Because the cliff whistles, and it listens. As you climb, loose gravel slides beneath your bare feet. Your hands search for grips in stone. Your lungs begin to burn. Still, you must make no sound of frustration. Only the wind may sing here. Those who climb before you say the hardest part is not the pain, it's the urge to explain yourself. To shout, I didn't mean to, or it wasn't fair. But the cliff wants none of that. It wants only your quiet effort. Halfway up, your arms shake. You look down, and the world spins. You feel the sting of your own pride, now slipping like pebbles from your grip. You remember the wrong, the insult you threw in anger, the sacred rule you mocked, the elder you disobeyed. And still, you do not speak. You push upward. One hand. One foot. Breathe in. Breathe out. Let your apology ride on the wind. Some say the cliff whistles louder for the truly ashamed, as if echoing their breath with its own. Others say if the cliff grows silent, it means it has accepted your pain. No one ever knows for sure. When you reach the top, there is no welcome. Only a single smooth rock where many sat before you. You rest. And listen. Sometimes, the wind whispers names. Sometimes, it goes still. You don't wait for a sign. You just stay until your breathing slows, until your muscles forgive you, and until your spirit no longer fights what has already been done. When you descend, the village watches, but says nothing. If you speak first, the ritual is broken. If they speak first, you are forgiven. As you step onto the flat earth once more, a small child breaks from the crowd and offers you a leaf of kawakawa, sacred and healing. The punishment is done. But the climb, the breathless, voiceless journey upward, will echo in your bones forever. You wake with a start. The stars above are no longer where they were when you closed your eyes. The embers of the Waranui fire are distant now, cold, unreachable. The familiar scent of moss and woven flax mats has vanished, replaced by the metallic tinge of river water. You're alone. Truly, achingly alone. No voice called you here. No hand guided you upstream. That was the point. You have been banished. But this wasn't just physical exile. In ancient Maori villages, being sent upstream was a sentence so severe, so symbolically brutal, it was often considered a fate worse than death. It begins with silence. No one speaks your name, not when you're summoned to the edge of the Maori, not when the Tohunga, spiritual elder, announces your punishment to the wind, not when your own family bows their heads and steps back. And you, standing barefoot in the dirt, feel the weight of that silence more than any shout or curse. You don't walk away, you are unseen as you leave. Your footprints are not to be mentioned. Your sleeping mat will be burned. The space you once filled at meals will remain vacant for 3 sunrises, then someone else will sit there as if you never were. The punishment was called Te Panaki Ronga, the push upstream. But why upstream? Because water, in Maori cosmology, carries more than fish and foam. It carries mana, spiritual power, tapu, sacredness, and stories. Water flows from the sacred mountains down to the sea, and it is along that current that the tribe lives, from elders closest to the mountains to the youngest playing by the shore. To send someone upstream was to remove them from this living lineage, to strip them of flow, of community, of continuity. It said, you are no longer part of our story. And yet, you're not dead. You must live with that. You build a shelter. Badly. No one is there to show you how to angle the reeds to keep out the rain. You try to light a fire but have only wet sticks and your hands won't stop shaking. You begin to mutter to yourself, not out of madness, but to fill the unbearable quiet. The river seems louder than before. Not rushing. Breathing. It's here you remember the old tale of the one-eyed watcher, a spirit that sits upstream from the village, born from the souls of those exiled unjustly. According to whispered legend, the watcher has only one eye because he gave the other to the gods, begging them to see what the people could not, his pain, his truth, his worth. Now, he sees everything that happens upstream. And tonight, as the fire finally catches, you feel it. A gaze. You catch fish with traps made from vines and bark. You eat berries and chew on bitter leaves, not for sustenance but for distraction. You speak the names of your ancestors aloud, though you know none will respond. Days pass. Weeks, perhaps. Time folds oddly when no one speaks your name. Then something strange happens. One morning, you wake to find a single cooked eel left by the edge of your hut. Wrapped in clean flax. Still warm. No footprints. No shadows. The village has rules, and they are still obeyed. No one is allowed to speak to the banished. But the Watcher? The Watcher sees mercy where people only see law. You begin carving. Using a sharpened stone and the time you have too much of, you etch patterns into the wood outside your shelter. Symbols of regret. Spirals of apology. You carve your name backward, over and over. You remember the old saying. Even upstream, the river remembers. So you start speaking aloud, not to the spirits or the river or even yourself, but to the ancestors who once sat in the meeting house. You tell them what happened. What you did. Why you did it. You speak not to be forgiven, but to be heard. One morning, a change. There are footprints. Clear ones. Small ones. Children. You follow the trail just far enough to find small tokens placed on a stone, a bird feather, a smooth stone, a carved shell. Silent gifts. You understand. They've heard your voice carried down the river. They remember. That night, you dream of the one-eyed watcher, seated beside your shelter. He doesn't speak. He only nods. And when you wake, the river has shifted. You know what it means. One day, a canoe arrives. No one paddles it. It floats, slow and steady, guided by the current and something else. Inside, a folded feather cloak. You place it on your shoulders. And as you drift downstream, back toward the village, you notice the fire on the Mary has already been relit. People are standing, waiting. They do not speak. Not yet. But their eyes are open. And so is the other half of the river's story. Section 13. The moon hangs low and heavy tonight. Not like a coin. More like an eye. You lie on a woven mat outside the carved Waranui. The cool grass presses against your back, and above you, the sky stretches endlessly, dark and deep, stitched with stars. But there's something else in the air. A tension. A pause before something ancient returns. Tonight is a night for judgment. You're told that not all trials in ancient Maori villages were held by sunlight. Some were reserved for darkness. Not because there was anything to hide, but because certain truths only reveal themselves beneath the full moon's gaze. The elders speak of the night trials, when justice was not shouted, but whispered. When voices dropped low and the air itself became sacred. Only certain cases were judged under moonlight. Crimes involving broken tapu, unexplained sicknesses, dreams that foretold betrayal, and, sometimes, accusations brought by the dead. You feel a chill, not from the night, but from the idea that a ghost might demand justice. In some Maori beliefs, the dead could communicate through dreams or strange happenings, winds that moved against reason, birds that called out a name again and again, or sudden illnesses that refused to leave. And when such signs persisted, a night trial was called. But it was not like other trials. You close your eyes, and suddenly you are there, sitting at the edge of the sacred clearing. The only light is the silver glow of the moon, pouring across the Mary like a blessing or a warning. The accused stands in the center. But the judges? They are not the usual elders. Tonight, they wear white robes, woven from flax and dusted with ash. Their faces are hidden beneath thin veils of tapa cloth, and they speak in verses rather than plain words. They are not only human tonight. They are moon judges. You watch, barely breathing, as they move in a circle around the accused, never touching, never rushing. They chant softly. The wind answers them. There are no torches. No fire. Just the pale shimmer of moonlight painting everyone in ghostly silver. The questions asked are not "Did you do it?" or "Why?" They ask instead, "What did the wind see? What did your ancestor feel in their bones? Where did the dream begin?" You don't understand the answers, but you feel them. They hum beneath your skin like the beat of a deep drum. Then comes the final part. The accused must walk alone across the clearing, toward a stone marker bathed in moonlight. If they reach it without stumbling, without the wind blowing against them, without an owl calling out their name, they are cleared. But if any omen interrupts their walk, if the moon suddenly disappears behind a cloud, or a cry is heard from the forest, or they themselves falter, the trial is over, and the verdict is sealed. Guilty, in the eyes of moon and ancestor. You wonder if that's fair, if that's just. But fairness was not always about evidence. Sometimes, it was about balance. And these trials were meant to restore spiritual harmony, not just punish. You think of those robes again, how light they looked, like spider silk in smoke. You imagine being called to one of these trials, not knowing what the night might reveal, feeling your heartbeat louder than the chants. Once the trial ends, there is no applause. No announcement. Only a hush. The accused either walks back to their hut, or is led away in silence. The moon judges disappear into the trees, robes fluttering like mist among leaves. And by morning, the village behaves as if nothing happened. No one speaks of what the owl said. No one mentions the shadow that passed over the moon. But everyone knows. Because justice, once whispered beneath starlight, cannot be unheard. You shift beneath your blanket. The grass is cool beneath your fingers, like the earth is listening. You wonder how many trials happened in this very clearing. How many footsteps left no trace? How many dreams carried the truth when no one else dared to speak? The moon begins to drift behind the trees. Your eyes grow heavy. You take one last breath, slow and deep. And as sleep finds you, you think of the moon judges, still wandering between the branches, robes glowing, listening for the next name carried by the wind. They gather you at dawn. The mist clings to your arms, damp and cold like the breath of the ancestors. You're not shackled, there are no chains here, but you walk like someone bound. Not by rope, but by memory, by shame. Everyone already knows what you did. The village doesn't shout. It doesn't throw stones. It simply watches. That's enough. A low hum vibrates through the sacred courtyard. Elders stand beneath the carved beams of the Waranui. Your Wana, your extended family, remains silent. Even your mother won't meet your eyes. You wonder if she's ashamed, or simply protecting her heart from what's about to be carved into your skin. A tattoo is sacred in Maori culture. A moko, especially a moko kaui, chin tattoo, or mataora, facial design, is a mark of honor, heritage, identity. But this is not that. This is the moko hara, the tattoo of wrongdoing. It begins with a chant, low and slow, not accusing, but mourning. The tattooist, the tohongata moko, approaches. Their hands are steady. Their eyes are kind, but unyielding. This is not revenge. This is correction. They dip the chisel into black pigment made from burnt kauri resin and charcoal, mixed with ash. The smell, sharp, earthy, fills your nostrils. You close your eyes. The first strike of the chisel doesn't ask permission. The pain is not just sharp. It's personal. A pounding reminder that some mistakes live longer than apologies. The skin splits beneath the tool. Ink seeps in. What once was smooth and forgettable becomes etched, deliberate. Each tap of the ui, the chisel, feels like a syllable of a story you'll be forced to tell forever, even if you never speak again. No one explains the design to you. But you know what it means. The spirals that curl around your left cheek say you betrayed trust. The broken line across your jaw reveals you stole from your brother's canoe. The crooked arc under your eye whispers of lies told in the dark, when you thought no one was listening. And now, you will carry them. On your face. Children will stare. Strangers will know. Lovers may turn away. Even in death, your bones will tell your story to future archaeologists. The punishment isn't just for now, it's forever. You sit still for hours. Flinching is weakness. Running is cowardice. Tears? You can cry. Tears are allowed. But they won't change the pattern. When it's done, your face burns like firewood left too long in the flame. They wrap your shoulders in a rough flax cloak, and you're told to stay inside the Waranui until the bleeding stops. The house smells like smoke, earth, and old sweat. You stare at the carvings on the walls, eyes, mouths, tongues protruding. Some look angry. Others amused. You wonder how many faces before yours have sat in this same corner, holding the same pain. You wonder if they ever healed. Outside, the children laugh again. Life continues. But you are marked, changed, named in a way that cannot be undone. But in time, something strange happens. An old man sees you at the river one day and nods. A girl in the village weaves you a new belt and places it silently on your doorstep. You begin to help more. Carry firewood. Fix broken fences. Clean the canoes without being asked. You still feel the stares, but now, they're different. Less like daggers. More like questions. Eventually, a young boy asks you what your moko means. You kneel down. Tell him. You tell the truth. And the boy listens. And you realize, perhaps the tattoo isn't just a punishment. Maybe it's also a story. A warning. A lesson. Maybe, just maybe, it's a second chance. Night falls. The sky is endless and black, with stars so bright they look like someone poked holes in the heavens to let the light through. You sit alone on a rocky hilltop, far from the village. Behind you, the last embers of a ceremonial fire crackle. In front of you, nothing but the wind in the past. This was the final punishment. Not death. Not exile. It was fire. But not the kind that destroys. The kind that burns away lies. They had called it the Na'ahiwakama, the fires of shame. This punishment was not given lightly. It was reserved for those who had lied not just with words, but with spirit. For breaking sacred oaths. For pretending to be someone they were not. The worst crime of all, disrespecting the tapu, the sacred laws that protect the harmony between the people, the land, and the ancestors. But instead of a sentence, you were given a choice. 3 days in silence. 3 nights by the fire. Alone. You were given a small bowl of water. No food. A single flax mat. The fire had to be kept alive at all times. If it went out before the 3rd sunrise, you would be sent away, banished, forgotten. You remember how the 1st night was cold. The 2nd, colder. The 3rd, the cold didn't touch you anymore. By the 2nd day, your stomach had stopped growling. Your thoughts grew louder. You began to see faces in the flames. Not just your ancestors, but those you had hurt. A friend you lied to. A child you mocked. An elder you disrespected. You whispered their names into the fire. The smoke carried them up. By nightfall of the 3rd day, something changed. Not outside. Inside. You no longer waited to be forgiven. You forgave yourself. And that was the true fire. In the morning, you returned to the village, not expecting a welcome. But the Camacho, the eldest, stood at the edge of the Mary with a small bowl of ash. You knelt before him. He dipped his fingers in the ash and traced a single mark across your brow. Not a tattoo. Not permanent. Just a sign. A mark to say, this one return changed. No songs were sung. No speeches were made. But your sister smiled at you that night, and your cousin handed you a gourd of sweet water. And for the first time in months, you drank without shame. Now, you sit still. You breathe slower. The wind that once carried chants and scoldings now brings only soft air through the trees. The stories are over, for now. You imagine the old village again. Not the punishments. Not the fear. But the simple things. A child's laughter as they chase a carved toy across the dirt path. The flicker of torchlight on woven walls. The sound of hands pounding taro, steady and strong. The hush of the ocean beyond the cliffs. You remember how the same people who judged could also heal. How the same elders who cast you out could someday welcome you back. How every punishment, no matter how odd, painful, or strange, was really just a tool to reshape the spirit, not to break it. Some scars fade. Some stay. But all of them whisper stories. Maybe that's why these tales still echo. Not because they were cruel, but because they worked. In their own strange way, they made the village whole again. Now your hands rest gently at your sides. Your shoulders loosen. The breath at the base of your belly deepens. You've traveled across fire pits and soul swamps, across ghost huts and silent exiles. And yet, you are safe. You are warm. You are here. Let the images fade like smoke. Let the chants drift into wind. Sleep, knowing that even the strangest endings can hold the gentlest peace. Good night.